Bienvenue, hola to all of our listeners, subscribers, and potential new time listeners. Welcome back to the Amateur Bowl. Yes, drink to that.
Hello, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, so I mean, again, as usual, I think we have a very solid episode lined up for you today, or not. It's a kind of a complicated one. We'll just jump right into it. Max, what are you doing today?
Okay, so last time what we did was we created our own power rankings and then kind of compared them to what the media sources that we picked out, what they thought.
Suck.
A lot of them I find kind of dumb, but you know that's the way she goes, I guess. We wanted to kind of create an aggregate list just so we can make it seem like if everybody's opinions are in together, then it's not just one individual's stupid opinions making the decisions and swaying things, but it turns out everyone's pretty stupid. So yeah, that's how it works. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go from position to position just so you guys can kind of see where our rankings came from.
And they were extremely similar. Just a disclaimer between me and Max, they were like couple picks apart, but generally speaking, a lot of them were very similar.
Yep, absolutely. We our overall power rankings list were kind of different in the sense of where we valued a few teams, but where we valued the individual players are actually quite similar. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start with the quarterbacks, and we're going to go through every position kind of grouping. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to overall offense and overall defense. So why don't we start with the quarterbacks?
I think it's pretty far. No, I think number one is pretty obvious. It's not really that much up for discussion. It's our resident blue shell, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. The three main teams, the three teams me and Max had in the top three were the Chiefs, Seahawks, and the Ravens. And again, I don't think that's really up for discussion. Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes are probably the three best quarterbacks in the league right now. And then just in terms of the rankings the reason that ours is a bit different is because we also took into account backup quarterbacks as well. This isn't just the starters. So just keep that in mind as well. So we're basically ranking like all the players in this that this team has at each position. And
we're not just ranking players. We're going to do that in later episodes. What we're going to do is rank the position grouping per team. So in the situation of the quarterback and to a certain extent positions like tight end, it's going to be just the number the one guy starting. But for the others, it's going to be the entire unit. And for me, the ones that I thought I ranked a little higher because of the backup are the Saints and the Packers. I put them a little higher than if Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers were on their own. Like, for example, I like Matt Ryan more than I like Drew Brees. And I like Kirk Cousins right now more than I like Aaron Rodgers. And you can hate on me for saying that, but check their stats. They're very similar. They do different things in their systems, but I like how Kirk Cousins is right now. And I like his offense a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
Vikings are
actually,
scary,
I guess their offenses are kind of on the same level, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
They're not. Yeah, exactly. We'll touch on that later. But I mean, one team that you actually had in your honorable mentions. I mean, so I didn't do an honorable mention, but one of the teams I came very close to putting on this list was actually the Detroit Lions. And the reason that the Detroit Lions at least came to mind is I think I've said this in the past, but I think Matthew Stafford is one of the most underappreciated and underrated quarterbacks in the league, despite having a really big contract. And again, I just think that contract, because it's so big, it just gives the media reason to kind of scrutinize him a lot more. Even though if you look at the team around him, it's nowhere as good as it should be, and he literally can't carry the team by himself. But that's the one main one that almost snuck into my top 10, but I still stand by mine. I don't really think there's anything else that would change about my list.
Yeah, and I was looking through his stats earlier today because I was thinking, I don't know, maybe I want to put him over Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, maybe I don't. Mm-hmm. And all things considered, for the amount of times the guy throws, his completion percentage is like low to mid 60s, which is incredibly impressive for someone that's throwing the ball nearly 600 times a season.
And if you consider the target that he's throwing to, it's pretty remarkable how how's both his completion percentage and his passing yards continue to be so high, like year after year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and he's had guys like Golden Tate, who's more of a slot guy, but still very handy with his hands. Yeah, that didn't really make much sense.
Okay.
Forget I said that. Marvin Jones, who's still on the team, pretty good. Kenny Golladay, who's emerging as a top wide receiver. So they've had decent talent, but they haven't had a run game. So that's really what's been hampering him. So hopefully with this year, with an actual good running attack, with bringing DeAndre Swift and having Kerryon Johnson, hopefully that
DeAndre
helps
Swift is very exciting. I'm very excited to watch him play for the Lions.
Yep, looking forward to that. And it sucks that there are just some better areas or better teams in front of him. Also, David Blau played a little bit last year for the Lions. He's their number 3 because they brought in Chase Daniel, but he was a serviceable backup, David Blau. So I respect that, but it's just not enough for me to put them on the list.
Yeah, no, that's something that's completely fair. And again, I think if you take a look at the teams that we put ahead of the Lions, I think it's pretty fair to say that Matthew Stafford's a great quarterback. But I just think if you combine the value with him and his backup, it's just not quite as great as the ones that we have on here.
Just to quickly go over some of the other teams here on the list. We both have the Eagles rounding out our top 5 with Jalen Hurts as the backup and Carson Wentz as the starter.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that Carson Wentz would be more healthy with the offensive line that he has.
Yeah,
but it is what it is. Jadeveon Clowney completely destroyed his leg. I don't know. He's a top 5 quarterback in my eyes. Maybe not top 5, but definitely top 10. With Jalen Hurts there, who was one of the most valuable players in college football last year, they've got to be up there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I really value Carson Wentz. I think he's a great an extremely great young quarterback when he's healthy, and it's just because of his health. The Saints almost took the Eagles 5 spot on my list, but again, I just think when he's healthy, there's so much upside there, and especially with them bringing in Jalen Hurts as a backup, I just couldn't. To me, the value with Jalen Hurts as a backup kind of negated any points I was going to take away from the injury issues of Carson Wentz. I think even if Jalen Hurts only plays a few games, I still think he's probably one of the better backups that in the league this year.
Absolutely, and I'm very interested to see how they're going to play him this year. Similar to how RG3 is going to be used in the Ravens offense, he was in the backfield a few times last year. So the Ravens do use him. And talk about
injury-riddled quarterbacks.
Yeah, exactly. And of all the backup quarterbacks on this list, there is no backup quarterback that looks as much like the starter as Robert Griffin III does with Lamar Jackson.
Literally.
When he came in, RG3 is like Lamar, but slightly less athletic because his knees are jello and a slightly less confident thrower. They are adept to the exact same scheme, and it's really cool to see because it's like having Mini-Me in there, even though RG3 is a lot older. The other backup quarterbacks that are good here, like Jameis Winston and Jordan Love and Andy Dalton, they're not the same as their starting quarterbacks, despite them being very good on their own. Like Jameis Winston is the reason the Saints are at number 6 for me. I think he's a very Simon and I agree. He's very capable quarterback, and there's a good chance that the Saints brought him in to be the starter in a few years. There's a good chance.
Like, the thing is, like, he has the arm strength. Like, if this guy can just work on, like, I think I saw that he's having LASIK eye surgery to have his vision repaired. Like, the guy has the arm strength. It's not like he's underthrowing his targets. Like, this guy can just, like, whip the ball down the field, which is, I think, one of the most important things you need to see. So if he can just work on whether it's his throwing mechanics or just how he sees the field, that could be a remarkable pickup for the Saints and like a potential steal we talk about down the road just in terms of like free agency.
Yeah, it's very possible. And Taysom Hill's there too, just in case Winston sucks. But I haven't seen, honestly, and this is a really funny stat, but Jameis Winston has thrown more touchdown passes to the Saints than Taysom Hill has.
I know.
You got to remember. You got to remember that. It's like 10-7 too. It's not even. It's close, but it's not even that close.
It's not close.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just hilarious to think about that Jameis Winston, despite being on a division rival, was more valuable to the Saints than Taysom Hill was at the quarterback position. Well, that actually, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just one thing. Sorry, just one thing on Jordan Love. I kind of have Jordan Love in the same boat as Jameis Winston, although I will say that because he was just drafted, I have Jordan Love's value a bit lower than Jameis Winston. Because I will say this, coming out of college, I think Jordan Love had an okay year, not great, but basically what scouts were saying coming into the draft was that this guy could potentially have the highest upside of any quarterback in the draft. It's just he has a couple issues that needs to work out in terms of his game. But again, it's from that perspective, I think it's very similar to Jameis Winston. I think they both have remarkable upside, but they just have to work through a couple of flaws in their game to kind of get to that elite, or maybe not elite, but like extremely good starting quarterback range.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that Jordan Love is a pretty different quarterback to Aaron Rodgers. So if he were to come in and start, he brings a slightly different skill set. So he'll have to be molded a little bit more than other quarterbacks here because of the system that the Green Bay Packers kind of like to roll with. But we'll see because, again, if upside is upside, then he'll probably be fine coming in regardless. And that offensive line is still good, so he'll be fine.
Yep, for sure.
Moving on to the Texans at 4, and some people may think that Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson. Obviously, those people they're not totally wrong, but I think they're pretty wrong. And they also have A.J. McCarron as a backup who knows how to be an NFL quarterback. I'm not going to come out and say he's a good quarterback, but he knows how to be a quarterback. And that's pretty much all you can ask for with a backup quarterback, right?
That's really it. I mean, you just need a guy who knows how to play in certain games that is just serviceable. Because I think with a lot of teams, like if your quarterback goes down, that's kind of it for you. Because not a lot of teams can really afford to have like 2 starting quality quarterbacks. Like look what happened with the Eagles. Nick Foles left, and it's very rare that you'll see teams with 2 starting quarterbacks. And there's a reason for that. So I think as long as you have a guy who can play and throw the ball, I think you're fine, which is I think what the Texans have. And I think in terms of the ones that are available, I think they have one of the better backup quarterbacks that aren't like either fresh out of the draft or like someone that they had to trade a lot of draft capital for.
Yeah, and the offense has enough pieces around it that A.J. McCarron won't be struggling too much he has to come in. He has Randall Cobb in the slot, Darren Fells down the middle, David Johnson out of the backfield, a decent enough pass protection in front of him. Like he'll be fine. Just like Matt Schaub if Matt Ryan ever goes down. I was surprised to see Matt Schaub as the backup of the Atlanta Falcons. That surprised me. He was pretty good with the Texans back in the early 2010s, and he kind of fell into irrelevancy as a backup. He was on the Ravens for a little bit, I think. But now here he is backing up another old guy, Matt Ryan. Matt Schaub was actually drafted in the same draft as Ben Roethlisberger and Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers. He was crazy. A little later on.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he's still kicking. He's outlasted Eli Manning, and he's still around. Not putting up their numbers, but he's still around. And yeah, Matt Ryan is still a very capable quarterback. And if possible, Matt Schaub can come in and not be horrible.
I agree with everything you just said. Matt Ryan's still great, except in that Super Bowl game, but we're not going to talk about that. And it was, again, I think you can't go wrong with anyone on this list. They're all great in terms of both the starter and the backup, but yeah, for sure.
What do you think about Matt Ryan? Okay, he was drafted in 2008, so he's been in the league for about 12, 13 years. Assuming he has another 5-6 years left in him where he very slowly regresses, do you think he's Hall of Fame caliber?
I think so. Personally, I think it'll be tough, but I don't think it'll be first ballot. I definitely think he has more than a fair opportunity to get in. I'll say that.
He was an MVP, and he went to a Super Bowl and a lot of playoff runs. That definitely counts for something, and the numbers are there. So, and he'll probably be playing for a lot longer than some of those other Hall of Fame considerable quarterbacks. From my perspective, I'm going to compare every prospective quarterback that is considered to be going to the Hall of Fame. I'm going to put them back to back with Kurt Warner from here on out, because he just made the Hall of Fame a few years ago, and he only played for like 10 years. Kurt Warner, and he had like 4 good years in his career.
That's a really good measuring stick for sure.
Yeah, he won 2 MVPs. He won a Super Bowl and lost a Super Bowl. No, he lost 2 Super Bowls, one of which was with the Cardinals, which has to count for something, because the Cardinals were not the greatest franchise when he got there. So that has to be taken into consideration. He is like the epitome of that boomer bust pick, because he's done a lot individually, but those years where he's done a lot individually are the only years he has. The rest have been pretty bad. Have been like borderline backup years, like when he was with the Giants and a young Eli Manning was there. So from here on out, I'm going to compare any quarterback like Matt Ryan or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers, anyone that comes out, I'm going to compare them to Kurt Warner, and if they have an at level or better resume than Kurt Warner, that's what I'll probably say is.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I'm thinking. No. And I'm sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but that's what I was thinking about Matt Ryan. I really like him. I'm high on him, so that's why I wanted to say that.
Too. I really like him too. I wish he was younger so he could stay in the league longer, actually. But
but his intelligence as a quarterback and his leadership comes from the fact that he's been around for so long, and that's kind of where the value comes from, and the fact that he can throw the ball pretty well. Speaking of quarterbacks, I'm high on. I really wanted to put Ryan Tannehill on this top 10 list. However, he's had one good year in a sea of not so great years, and he's going to have to go up against the Colts and Texans twice, and the Jaguars defense is pretty nasty. And they've kind of seen him once as their starter, so I don't know how he's going to fare, but I know I'm confident somewhat in his abilities, enough to put him in an honorable mention.
Yep, for sure. And the like just the sea of the sea of not so great seasons was why the Titans didn't even really come to me in terms of top quarterback groups, and I think that's fair. I think Ryan Tannehill definitely had a really good season last year, especially for what the Titans got him for, which was nothing. I think they signed him out of free agency. But this year will be a big year for Ryan Tannehill for sure. This is his show me last year wasn't a fluke year, and I think if he can do that, great. Then I think the Titans really found themselves a gem in the free agency last year, kind of similar to the way we're talking about Jameis Winston.
Yep, absolutely. And there were a lot of quarterbacks, or not a lot. There were a few quarterbacks last year that had good like first years with their team. Like Drew Lock, for example, had a pretty decent start with the Broncos, and there are a few other quarterbacks that had to be thrown in, like David Blau, that did relatively well, and it was also Jimmy Garoppolo's first year, really having the reins for the full year. Yeah. And Tannehill outperformed all of them, despite having one of the worst performing offensive lines in the league. He still had put up stats that are not normal for a guy that had an offensive line that wasn't protecting him in pass protection the way that they were, or that they were doing it in a very poor way. And it was really impressive, and that's why I decided that he needed to have an honorable mention himself. And they also drafted Cole McDonald in the 7th round, so they have a rookie quarterback. So I think those two together put up a duo that's worthy of an honorable mention. Just like Kyler Murray and Brett Hundley in Arizona, I'm high on Kyler Murray. Brett Hundley played well in aid for Aaron Rodgers when he went down with his injury 2 years ago. So they have a quarterback with really high upside and a young backup that could come in and command the offense if need be.
No, absolutely. I agree with 100% of the thing you just said. Kyler Murray's great. And again, I think I should need to see a bit more for him to for me to be really consider him as a honorable mention for a top 10 quarterback grouping. But that being said, I still think he's solid. And I think he's only going to go up from his season last year, especially with the help that he has on offense. I mean, his offensive line still needs a bit of work, but other than that, I still think Kyler Murray has tremendous upside.
Yeah. Okay. That's what we had. Honestly, this one was the quarterback position was probably one of the easier ones to do, in my opinion.
For sure.
Like, there were some good quarterbacks that we left off, like Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen, and a few others that I'm high on. But this is the direction I went on with this one, and you probably went a very similar, if not the exact same direction. And for those of you watching, you'll see us having a much more difficult time with the future positions that we're going to go over.
Yep, for sure. See you next time for the running back rankings.